Welcome to Publish It Group Talks. My name is Lauren, and our studio guest today is Justin Fox. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you, Lauren.
So nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Just for the audience, we always introduce the channel and we give them a little bit of an overview of what we're about for new listeners. Our channel is about creating a digital mentorship program, and that young creatives, not necessarily young in age, but of any age, can tune in and listen to the show and always take away something that can help educate, inform, and inspire them. So the motto of our show is arrive smart, leave smarter. And that's what we hope that you do at the end. So we'd like to just give a short bio on Justin. And Justin is a travel writer, novelist, and photographer. He's based in Cape Town. He's also currently the editor of Getaway Magazine. And he was a Rhodes Scholar and received a doctorate in English literature from Oxford University. He taught at the University of Cape Town for over 20 years. And he's also multi-talented, like written 17 books. Amazing. I mean, that in itself is I think incredible, and there's a lot of hard work that goes into all of that. Not only is his articles amazing, but his photography is incredible. His children's book that he's just written, My Great Expedition, is an incredible book, and some of the more recent novels being Whoever Fears the Sea and The Impossible Five. So if you just Google him, and I already did, you just find tons of information, and all these books are listed. So if you're at exclusive, you can kind of tune in, check out what he's up to. But today he's here to talk to us from a rookie perspective. He's here to speak a bit about like how to write for travel. We're looking at what to do to prep for the interview, how the mindset needs to be, how to cover articles that have already been covered on numerous occasions, but keeping them interesting and current, and how to grab an audience attention to really draw them into what you're saying and being effective with that. So that's what we're going to look at today.
Fine, let's do it.
So the first question I'd like to ask you is, what do you think are the most important things for a young writer? And I say young writer because here the audience we're kind of talking are to a younger audience who may be writing on behalf of let's say a hotel or a small little magazine, and they're asked to cover articles about various places. What would you give them that tip of advice?
I think the most important thing is curiosity. If you don't have curiosity, you're not going to be trying to sniff out the good stories and try to find out the behind the scenes sort of information. So I think curiosity, definitely number one. And in journalism, we talk about the W's, the where, who, how, what, when. And that's the kind of rabbiting, ferreting, nitty-gritty journalism fact finding. And that also plugs into curiosity. The other thing is a love of reading and a love of words, because so much of what we learn when we're traveling or writing or in journalism or in creative writing comes from learning from our peers or our betters or our forebears. And so spending a lot of time reading what other people are writing about the thing that you're writing about is the first step. So I would say if you've been asked to go and write a story on anything, whether it's a hotel or a town or a game park or Table Mountain or whatever it is, the first thing you do is to go and read as much as you can about that subject. And that means reading from every different kind of source you could possibly imagine, so that you're already arriving at the topic when you get to writing about it with a bedrock of good solid information and knowledge. And that also sparks questions and curiosity once you've done the reading.
And that makes sense. When you say go and read as much as you can about it, our generation will automatically Google that.
Yes. That's step one, but it's the first of many steps. First, you Google your Wikipedia, you go to Instagram, you go to Google Images, you get a sense of the place. You can get a good sense of the place, but that's often a very shallow take. Then you need to move to plan B and C and D, and for me, being in travel and tourism, I'll look at other travel magazines that might have covered it. So I'll go into their websites. I'll go into the Lonely Planet website, or Wanderlust website, or National Geographic, or I live in Cape Town, so there's just tons and tons of information online through the travel portals about Cape Town or Table Mountain or whatever I'm writing about. Then I would want to go to a bookshop and maybe trawl through guidebooks or travel magazines or map books or photographic books or coffee table books that might be around the topic that I'm interested in. Then I'd start speaking to friends and family. Have they been to that place? What is their feeling about it? If it's somebody older, a parent or a grandparent or something, get a little bit of history around the place and the context. And then for me, the most important step is to try and find books that have been written about it. And that means going to my local library, going to a university library, going to a bookshop, or going to a secondhand bookshop and trawling. And I write a lot about, say, Cape Town or the Western Cape, so I have a big library at home of secondhand books from the last 100 years, and I can easily dip into chapters that might be pertinent to something I'm writing about. Mm. And then you'd also want to interview people. So you find out who's good at the topic you're interested in. Say now I'm writing about Cape Point. Then I'll try and set up an interview with the game ranger and the manager of the park, or people that work in the park, or somebody that's interested in otters or eland or the fauna or the flora, so that you're getting local knowledge. And all of that would happen even before I go to the place, so that I'm arriving with a backpack of knowledge, and that's critical, because so many young journalists just wing it, just arrive, and maybe have Googled one or two things, and then they're on a back foot before they start.
No, that's very true, and what you're saying to me now is makes a lot of sense. And I have never been a journalist myself. I've never been in a position where I've done any writing for a company. All the writing I've always done is for myself and whatever I'm doing. So, I like that approach where you got to see it from a lot of different angles. And I think that one could even take that same advice that you're giving and apply it to copywriting and creative writing. Absolutely. In a creative environment, because if you're selling a product and you're asked to sell that product, you should actually research everything about that product, how that other product similar has been sold, the people that were involved in creating the product, instead of just writing copy about the product, that, and this is the product and selling it.
I think I think the tip of the iceberg is a very good illusion, and I use it with my students. Is that the thing you write, whatever it is, whether it's a poem, a short story, an article, a novel, the knowledge that you bring into the book, the article, the PR piece, is a tiny little tip of the iceberg, and what sits below the surface, the 9/10 is the knowledge that you have accumulated before and during the writing, and the reader can pick up pretty quickly if you really know your subject. It's often a throwaway line, it's a little phrase, an adjective, a clause that conveys the sense that you are dealing with somebody who knows their stuff. And it's very apparent when you read writing that doesn't have that. It feels shallow, it sounds shallow. There's just something about the tone that you know that this person's just dashed this piece off and hasn't done the hard yards. And it's one of the problems of the blogging revolution, is that everyone's out there thinking that they can knock off a little piece about something. They went to a restaurant and they had a nice meal. They'll write a quick food blogging piece, but they haven't done the hard yards. And it shows.
It's the age of content creation. Even us sitting here doing this recording with equipment that's affordable but not crazy expensive like it would have been 20 years ago to produce something like this. And that's what the digital age has done. And I suppose on some levels you do get people who become undiscovered talent, and they kind of get discovered in that process of doing their blogs, and they actually are very talented writers. And then, like we were saying in other episodes, you're just sifting through this heap of crap at the end of the day on the other side of it. So
what's changed with the digital revolution and the blogging revolution and Instagram and Facebook and so on is that everybody's producing content all the time, huge tons of it, and and that's great, and it means everyone has a creative outlet, and it's a beautiful thing. However, what we tend to be losing is the gatekeepers of knowledge, and so there's so much noise and clutter out there, and it's not coming through the traditional portals where there was a publisher and an editor and an agent and a sub-editor and a copy editor and a proofreader and it goes through a kind of like a sphincter of where a lot of the dross is eliminated, and a lot of stuff is rewritten 5, 10, 15, 20 times until it comes out as something polished and something really worthwhile. With digital, everything just gets thrown out there, and that's what traditional magazines and traditional newspapers still have, although it's dying, is all those checks and balances, all the portals, all the sphincters. For instance, the Getaway Magazine article, if I've got a junior journalist writing for me, it'll probably go through 13, 15, even 20 drafts, and it'll be edited by 7 different people over the course of a month before I'll let it go into the magazine. All of that rewriting, which is painful, and it's dreary, and it's boring, and it's tedious, and the journalists get grumpy and irritated, and they're forced to go back and check facts again and again. It's drudgery, it's painful work, but the end product is going to be that much better than Joe Blogs, who blogged this morning about the same trip.
Yes.
And that's and because you don't have it as a blogger or a Facebooker or an Instagrammer, you have to try and do all of that stuff yourself in the modern world.
Yeah.
And that means often checking, double checking, triple checking, putting the story away is often a good thing. Locking it away. Leave it for a few weeks and come back. And then you start to see the mistakes much more clearly with time and distance.
Yeah, that's true. Do you think that, well, let's say, do you think there's a question actually that when I was doing some research into the kind of questions I'd like to ask and the kind of questions our audience would like to hear, and I phoned some of those in the industry, and one of the questions that came back to me is, can you ask Justin, do you think that quantity is important? Like, if I'm writing articles, should I write a lot of articles on a lot of different things, shelve them and then come back to them? Or because they're kind of feeling that they're needing to be producing content because the digital age is forcing content. And the one girl that I spoke to said that, she's almost expected to push out an article digitally one a week that's covering something so that the company can have an archive of information.
Yep.
She's feeling like, she knows it's quality, but like quantity, like how does she deal with all of that?
Yeah. The tragedy is quantity, people feeling that the need to constantly feed this monster. And many companies will force you. Some companies will want something to come out every single day. And of course, in terms of your CV and your growth and what you want to show to a future employer, it's those nuggets that you've spent weeks on, months on even, that are the really valuable ones. So I would say always quality over quantity. However, many jobs and professions, in my magazine, we have the journalists who are doing the articles, and they can spend a month on an article or 6 weeks. And then you've got the internet side of it, and we need content to appear every single day. So those journalists are on a very different type of cycle. And of necessity, it's got to be more bloggy, more instant, more happy snaps, and feed Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And the blog space and the website and so on, but that's a hungry monster that I dislike it. I know it's the modern world, but there's not much quality happening. There's almost no quality. There's very little quality happening in that space. Of course, there are always the nuggets.
And how do you maintain a happy medium on that they could sort of strive to have? Like pulling that through, so you've got to now produce this content, that it's not ideal, but you still want to be able to convey something that is a little bit quality. Is it that having that database of books that you refer to, what can they do to kind of keep that still authentic to a degree?
Okay, for a journalist who's having to kick out that daily stuff, I would want to try and send them away to do a trip, let's say 5 days, and get a really big meaty story that then can be broken up into lots of little bites, so that he or she can feed the monster with the little daily bites, the tips, the top 5 things to do them one a day, that kind of thing. But he or she has still created quite a nice, interesting, slightly more sophisticated, longer piece that then can go in the magazine, so it feeds both spaces. So that's one way to use that's one way to try and break stuff up into the bite-size material that can be fed into blogs and Facebook and etc. etc. I would also want the person that is going to do that longer story to then give them the time to dip into the resources, and books are the one. We have a little library, for instance, at our magazine, with travel books, guidebooks, map books, coffee table books. We buy a lot of magazines. We buy the big international magazines, National Geographic, Condé Nast Traveller, Wanderlust, Travel and Leisure, and we buy the local top travel magazines, Go, Weg, Country Life, etc. So that there's a lot of resources that the journalists can dip into, both for inspiration and for research. And then I'd also encourage them to go to YouTube and to places like that, Google Images, movies, videos, DVDs. You're a magpie as a journalist. You're looking for information from any source, and I don't care what the source is, as long as you're gathering a lot of information. And it might not even be journalistic or even non-fiction. I don't mind. I think it's very creative and very interesting for journalists to look at fiction, and to look at short stories, and to look at poetry, to look at the styles of writing, and to look at how a novelist deals with place. So if you're writing about Cape Town and you're doing a factual story about the gardens or Table Mountain or V&A waterfront, let's look at what novelists and how they've captured Cape Town. The style of writing, the metaphors, the similes, the imagery, the tropes, the whatever. Look up how poets write about Cape Town. Some with a very, very beautiful lyrical style, some with a very gritty, punchy kind of social democratic protest style of writing, and all of that is hugely helpful in how you develop your own style. But also, as a journalist, you might want to change your style quite often according to the subject you're writing about. If you go into a national park and you're writing about elephants and lions and landscapes and beauty, you might have a much more lyrical, much more gentle, much more lyrical style.
It's almost like you find that mood of the place.
Yes.
And then if you can tap into the mood of the place, then you can write around the mood.
Yeah.
Is what I'm picking up.
Exactly.
Is that there's a mood in that.
Yeah, and if you're writing about graffiti art in Woodstock, you might go for a much more gritty style of writing. And that's where the poets, the short story writers, and the novelists can help you, even as a journalist. Because something like travel journalism is very loose in that sense. It's not as rigid as news journalism. You are able to play. It's a genre that opens itself up to being much more creative, and a lot more like storytelling and less like journalism at times.
Should you keep your sentences quite short and punchy, or longer sentences, or you add a few commas in between? It may seem a very naive question, but
again, it depends completely on the subject matter and the style you've chosen to write about it. My style tends to be quite lyrical and romantic and poetic. Certainly when I'm writing about Africa and travel in Africa, I tend to the more poetic style. But yeah, every journal is different, and every article is different and might demand different styles. Also, again, there's the other spanner in the works, that your editor or the person commissioning it might determine the style and say you will write this way. And then you write to the formula provided. And
also, if the person who's commissioning it isn't, let's say, it's just the manager of the business and is not on any level a writer, author, or anything like that, they're just the manager and they've commissioned you to write these articles. You would basically be your whole department that you're managing just by yourself in a little silo. And I've seen that happening a lot. You know, just by interacting with different people in the industry and us doing the training, etc., and you find that you're sitting now with someone who is their department.
Yes.
And their boss has no experience. What do you think would be the most effective way to write that you could get people to want to read your article? There must be a little trick, you could say.
There are many tricks and tips, and every journalist and writer develops their own, and it becomes part of their style and their voice and their persona. And every journalist develops also a tone of voice and so on. But I mean, I think in simple terms, humor is one of the most effective tools in certainly in travel journalism, having a little bit of humor. And a lot of the really famous travel writers like Bill Bryson and so on, people like that, use humor extremely effectively. So humor is one. The other is to get close to the action and have quite a dramatic style of writing. So you and sometimes that means writing in the present tense to create a sense of drama. I'm climbing Table Mountain. I'm moving up the face of a rock face and so on. Present tense humor. Interviewing, so there's not just your voice, just not me, which often ends up sounding like a happy holidays reading my diary or journal. So interviewing then breaks your voice so that you start to hear what other people are saying. So interviewing as you go is very important. Shortening your sentences and shortening your paragraphs also ups the pace, which draws the reader in. Not too many adjectives and adjectives. When you get into those kind of cliches, the kind of pearly white beach and the swaying palm trees, and you get into that kind of very easily slip into brochure speak when you're in travel writing, and that is as dull as dishwater. So you've got to avoid the cliches and the stereotypes. So originality, punchiness, changing the order around, so that you start at the end of the trip. You're not just a pure chronology. I arrived in Cape Town, I went to A, B, C, and then I went home. Switch it around. Start at the end. Breaks the rhythm.
That's quite a cool tip.
Yeah.
Would never think of doing that.
Yeah.
Actually.
There are lots of tricks, and I suppose the most important thing of all, above everything else, beyond all the tricks and techniques and styles and personas and voices, is the rewriting. Is that most of the creative process should be happening in all the rewrites. So once you've got a first draft down, that's not the end of the story. That's kind of only the beginning of the story. You go back and you polish and rewrite again and again and again. And that's where you can introduce the humor and all sorts of things and the creativity, and start chopping and changing the order and so on. It's a great failing of junior writers, is that they think once they've written it, it's done. It's not done. And that's also where time comes into it, where you can write it and create time to put it away. And I know if you're working on a newspaper or something, the deadlines are very tight. But on a magazine, they're much looser. So you can write it early and put it away for a week or two, and then come back and rewrite.
It's like fresh eyes.
It's fresh eyes.
And if you're being sent on an assignment, what should be the most important things that you pack for that assignment?
Again, it's all about where you're going, I guess.
If it is just local and you're covering Table Mountain or the gardens.
Well, the most important thing for a travel journalist is to take good photographs. The writing you can fix once you come home. The photographs you got to get when you're on assignment. If you're a junior journalist, you're going to be probably just using your smartphone. Learn how to use your smartphone properly. But as you progress, you're going to want to move on to a proper DSLR camera and start shooting properly. You're going to have to have three lenses: a wide-angle lens, a standard lens, and a long lens. Particularly if you're going to be shooting stuff at a distance, like animals or birds or so on, a long lens is important. I guess packing the photographic stuff's important. If it's a trip away from your hometown, it's packing light and packing smart, so that the luggage becomes a secondary thing, that you're not overburdened with luggage. You're wanting to be able to move quickly and move smart. And in Africa, it's also often about thinking smart about medical stuff, like mosquitoes. If you pack a little small mosquito net and mosquito repellents and that kind of thing. But it's all about the assignment. If I'm going to a tropical island, I'm going to pack kind of a dive ticket and scuba diving type stuff, and an underwater camera or an underwater housing. If I'm going to the Kruger Park, I want an extra long lens. I want a bean bag so I can rest the camera on something. I want if I'm shooting portraits of people, then I might want a reflector board to get some light reflecting onto a person. If I'm going up the west coast and I'm going to shoot flowers and bugs and insects and so on, I'll want a macro lens so I can get really close. So the packing is about thinking smart about where you're going and what you might need and all the eventualities.
And then random question,
Yes.
just out the box. What music do you listen to?
Strangely, trance is my personal.
No one expected that.
Trance is my home, and then
Yeah?
I also like American folk rock, which is
Nice.
way on the other end of the spectrum. Yeah, trance and trance house.
What do you like about trance?
The hypnotic space that you can get into a rhythm and a space and just track with it for hours without. It's almost a soporific, mindless. Trance-like space, particularly if I'm driving, and I spend a lot of time driving for my work. So if I'm doing a 10-15 hour drive from here to wherever, Kruger Park, then trance is the way to go, because trance is often without voice, and voice can intrude, and I'm often trying to think, and I also take a dictaphone with me, or I use my smartphone, and I record my voice when I'm driving, so that I'm already writing the story while I'm driving. Ideas come to me, and instead of having to pull off and get a pen and paper or a laptop out, I just talk into my phone.
Do you keep the trance running in the background? Because that could be quite an interesting track.
Turn it down. Yeah, I did turn it down.
But you can hear it in the background still.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's quite inspirational. Do you ever go to trance parties?
I used to. I don't go
Yeah.
anymore, but yeah, I used to go a lot.
That's cool. Thank you. And high five before we sign out.
Thank you, Lauren.
Just want to say thanks to the audience and keep in touch with us, follow us, share, tell people about us. We'll give you Justin's Instagram link, his Twitter, his Facebook, and you can see what he's up to. And please, go out, buy his book if you are in the industry, if you're anything to do with travel writing, journalism, etc. He's the artist, and you should be listening and keeping up with what he's doing. He's awesome. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Lauren.
Okay. Bye.